All right, live for the first time. Never done this before. This should be interesting. Um, my name's Kyle. Started my own business, SSV, a couple years ago. Uh, Part owner of Dorking Wanderers Football Club with the best sports story in the world. Towns right outside of London, 25 miles from Heathrow Airport. 12 promotions in 24 seasons. Cold called them, joined the ownership group, sit on the board of directors, senior management team, all that good stuff. So that's the pretty basic background of what I'm doing and what's kind of brought me here. But I just want to talk different sports business topics. I know there's a bit of a niche out there of people that find that kind of thing interesting. It's my passion. It's what I like the most. So that's what I want to talk about. All things sports business. And just what my story is, what's brought me here, and what's brought me here is pretty much lifelong fandom. Always been a super fan of all the teams I support, which is Philadelphia. Started huge Eagles fan, um, absolute Eagles fanatic, and that kind of taught me how to be a fan of something, and that's what really was the springboard of my life and the things that I care about most. It's really my friends, family, and sports is pretty much my thing. So that's we'll just keep that rolling. Obviously, I got the dorking stuff up there. Throwback jersey first. I got to move the right way first. Which way? That way. First kit badge they ever used, and then the updated look in the white jersey. But speaking upon what kind of brought me here in terms of that Eagles fanhood, I think that the Eagles are one of, if not the best run organization in the NFL. And why is that? In theory, and it's kind of funny, the United States is a very capitalistic society, but in our sports leagues, we're very socialistic. There's salary caps. So every team spends the same amount of money. If you look at the Dallas Cowboys, who probably do about 5 billion a year in revenue, they don't take that money with their excess revenue and are able to spend more on the team. It's a salary cap, so everybody spends the same. So in theory, every team should have an equal chance. You have your draft picks, you give out your contracts, and then you form your roster. So every team should realistically have the same chance to compete for a championship every year. Yet we have 12 teams that have never won it. Another small handful who have never even been there. And why is that? Why isn't the parity there in the NFL that's pseudo promised from a salary capped league? And I think that it's all about the people in positions of power. I think it's the owner and the general manager. So the owner obviously is the proprietor of the team. They own that business. And sometimes owners are taking a hands-off approach and they let people and their management team and their employees do what they're best at with their technical football knowledge and hiring staff and recruiting players and scouting players, etc. Speaking upon the Dallas Cowboys, they have an owner that likes to meddle in a lot of that stuff, and he wants to be the forefront and he wants to be the face of that organization actively to their detriment. I think that he does a very good job in terms of drafting and player recruitment, but he does a very poor job on the human capital aspect and hiring the right people. He's had a lot of lack of success with head coaches, and they have not been to an NFC championship game since 1996, which is since they've been there in 1996. Every other team in the NFC has reached that point besides them. So, bad ownership goes a long way in detriments to the team. We've seen it with, Dan Snyder in Washington. Now they're under Josh Harris. They drafted an unbelievable quarterback, and now they're playing the Eagles in the title game this Sunday. So the reason I think that the Eagles are so well run is because Jeffrey Lurie, their owner, he does a great job in not meddling. I think he has that perfect mix of being involved enough as an active owner, but he also trusts his staff and his people to do their jobs and not get involved too much. And the biggest reason for success that stems from Jeffrey Lurie is Howie Roseman. I think Howie Roseman, the general manager, is the most important person in the Eagles building. I think twofold. One, he did not start his career very well in terms of draft picks and player recruitment, but that has improved tenfold over the last couple of years. You look at this last draft and you see him draft Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean, who have been, they're both finalists for Defensive Rookie of the Year in a traditionally weaker spot in our defense in the secondary. Got two absolute lockdown corners there. The previous draft from that, Jalen Carter and Nolan Smith in the first round. Jalen Carter very well could be the next Aaron Donald. And Nolan Smith is coming along very well, developing well at the perfect time. He's been a huge impact for the Eagles late in the season and in this playoff run. So Howie has drastically improved his ability to scout and recruit players, through the draft and in free agency, whatever, other acquisitions he's making. But he has always been, and I think this is the biggest part that factors into the salary cap, is he's excellent at managing the cap. He signs players to contracts and manipulates the cap to the point where he pushes off money owed to subsequent years over and over and over. And they're able to fill the roster completely as a whole with unbelievably talented players. So now that he's doing that through the draft and improving that way, and also manipulating the finances to his and the Eagles' favor on a year-to-year basis, the Eagles have been one of the best teams in the league consistently over the past 20, 25 years, in my opinion, outside of a couple of hiccups, but especially since the Super Bowl in 2017. They win the Super Bowl in 2017 with a backup quarterback. They go back and they lose in 57 with Jalen Hurts, and they're a win away from making Super Bowl 59. And with a defense that's a lot of rookies and second-year players, that looks like it could be potentially the next Legion of Boom or elite defense on a year-to-year basis that we see in the NFL. And then he's paired that with unbelievable offensive talent. He always builds well on both the offensive line and the defensive line. Absolutely stacked wide receiver talent. Very good tight ends in Dallas Goedert and Grant Calcaterra. And then obviously the big offseason acquisition in Saquon Barkley running behind the offensive line, 2,000 yards, endless home run plays this year. On the back of elite defense and a running game that, Howie's built and created, they could very well win a championship this season and also be in contention for multiple championships moving forward. He paid Jalen Hurts a lot of money, but the way he negotiated that contract and the way that it looks on the books is, Jalen Hurts is paid as a fringe top 5 quarterback, which is probably where his talent level is right now. So they're not, in a cap hell situation where they're hooked on Jalen Hurts. I'm a big fan of Jalen. Some people are, some people aren't. But the team as a whole is really coming together, both sides of the ball, position for position. I believe they're the most talented roster in the NFL. And that's not just in aging old players or expensive contracts. That's for cap manipulation. That's for signing guys to the right contracts and building an entire team and unit. So that general manager position is so important in the NFL that I think it can change the course of franchises. It's all about who you have in that position of power. It's about having ownership, not trying to take control of that position and hiring the right guy to control your franchise, because there's so much trust in the general manager and he controls everything that the team is doing, more or less. So Jeffrey trusting Howie Roseman in that role is bar none why the Eagles are so successful and so effective. So I credit all of the Eagles' success to Howie Roseman and what he can do financially and talent-wise for the team. And I think that like I said, it's going to lead to a lot of long-term success, and the Eagles could dominate for the next 10 years on defense alone. So it's going to be really exciting. I think that they're going to get a win on Sunday, go back to the Super Bowl, and they have a really great chance to win it this season. So we'll see how it unfolds. But, back to that capitalistic nature of Americans and socialistic leagues, it kind of flips over in England when you look at the Premier League and, soccer, football as a whole in Europe, they don't abide by salary cap rules. It's financial fair play, or PSR, and basically that is just in its simplest form, you can spend on your players as much in direct correlation to the revenue that you bring in. So if Man City brings in 700 million a season, that's what they can go back and spend on their roster. Now there are some rules that are changing for 25-26 where you can spend up to 70% of your revenue on the playing squad. That's to protect teams from becoming insolvent, or, running dry on finances and potentially needing to fold. That doesn't really happen too much. It's not going to happen to any of the bigger clubs, but they want to financially protect these organizations so they're not getting into too much trouble. But, for the sake of argument, we'll say direct correlation, whatever revenue you bring in, that's the amount you can go back and spend on your roster. So there's different things that you need to do and stay on top of, because with the salary cap, you have your amount that you spend, and that's that. But with financial fair play and PSR, you have to, it becomes more capitalistic, because the rich teams, that's how they get to stack the rosters. And it didn't always used to be this way. When Abramovich bought Chelsea back in the day, he was able to spend whatever he wanted on Chelsea and turn them into a powerhouse. And now, because he laid that foundation, they're in a position where they're much more of a global brand, and they're able to bring in that revenue on a yearly basis. So it's very, very interesting that, you have the capitalism sports structure over in England and a socialistic sports structure over in the United States. But all in all, that definitely affects everything over at Dorking and what we want to do as a non-league club. For those of you that don't know, the first 4 steps in the English football pyramid, there is an English football pyramid, and it works on promotion relegation. You finish at the top of one league, you get promoted to a higher, more competitive league. If you finish at the bottom, you get bumped to a worse league, a less competitive league. So, with that promotion relegation, there's always that, financial urgency to make sure you're spending as much as you can on players and, bringing in a competitive team, because if you lose, there's financial ramifications for playing in a league with less exposure. Attendance might take a dip. You're going to sell less merchandise potentially. You may have to drop ticket prices. All of that affects the operation. That affects the revenue, and then that affects what you can go back and spend on the team. So within the English football pyramid, it goes 15, 20 steps deep. But, you have your first 4 steps: the Premier League, the Championship, League One, and League Two. And that's what's considered the Football League. The Premier League is separate from the EFL, which governs the Championship, League One, and League Two. But they do share TV revenue with the lower leagues to kind of help them, stay more competitive and, share in the exposure, because while the smaller teams are dependent on the bigger teams that are bringing in those viewership numbers, you can't just completely let the little guy, go by the wayside. There has to be some sort of balance while kind of caving to the guys that bring in the most viewership, but also making sure that, the smaller clubs aren't left completely in the dark, and there is still some, amount of competitive balance as much as you can. So, Dorking, who sit in the 6th tier currently, just got relegated from the National League. We've kind of been knocking on the door of making the Football League, which is where, some serious financial implications would happen. If we were to be promoted twice and get to League Two, join the Football League, that promotion windfall would start at £1 million a season. So now you're looking at the competitive structure of the sport, and the financial implications for Dorking are massive in a small team that started in just 1999 to get that £1 million a season to go and, kind of turn that operation into something that's more competitive and more in line to compete in the Football League. You can go through $1 million very, very quickly through players or other things that we need to do on the field and off the field, but it's a start. And that's where I think the operation really, really changes. Non-league's tough to get out of. I think we have a good chance to get promoted this season, but even if we don't, I think that the team's set up to, have that promotion happen soon. And then if we get back to the National League, back to right on that doorstep of the football league, the first shift for any club in that position happens when you enter League Two. So when you are fighting through the non-league leagues, get to League Two, that's the first organizational shift where you're, looking at the market a little bit differently. You're looking at ticket prices a little bit differently, sponsorships a little bit differently, exposure a little bit differently. That part of consolidation and reevaluation happens for clubs that are now at that League Two level. So that's the first shift that you see when you're fighting through the pyramid, at least when you're, close to the football league. When you're right at that door, that's number one. When does it change again, in my opinion? So I think that there's a lot of openness in terms of, how you handle player recruitment and the competitive balance of the pyramid system. I think there's a lot of openness between the bottom of the championship and the top of League Two. So if you just enter League Two, you might have to consolidate, spend some time, fighting off relegation. You might be mid-table for a while, but once you're ready to compete for that promotion from League Two to League One, the promotion windfall isn't that different. I think it only goes up like 600,000, something like that. It might be like 2 million. And then it takes maybe a jump to 5 or 6 million when you get from League One to the championship. So that openness in terms of talent, it's wide open from the bottom of the championship. The teams that are fighting to stay in there, that are probably going to go to League One, and then League One and League Two are very, very close in that competition. Obviously, mid to bottom of League Two, those teams might struggle to fight for those promotion spots. They may be fighting off relegation. I mean, teams every year are fighting off relegation back into the National League. So from a Dorking perspective, it shifts from the National League to League Two. And then I don't think it shifts again until you get to the championship. The championship is where teams face the most financial problems in trying to fight for that Premier League position. The average championship team, I believe, loses about £400,000 a week. And you're also fighting against teams that are recently relegated from the Premier League who are receiving parachute payments. So you have a number of clubs that are still operating on a much higher budget. And if you take the 3 teams that are relegated from the Premier League to the championship, and then you have 3 promotion spots from the championship to the Premier League, plus 3 more spots for playoff position, or it's 4 playoff positions. And then the first 2 in the championship automatically go up. But when you're looking at those 3 teams that get relegated, those 3 teams are essentially operating at least for 3 seasons or 2 seasons on a Premier League budget. So you have the 3 teams that are financially advantaged at that point, and then only 3 more spots for the playoff positions in. So, 1, 2, they go up, 3. Let's say that's a team still with a Premier League budget. That's a playoff spot. And then 4, 5, and 6, those are the last remaining spots. So you have teams that are really struggling to, financially keep up with that competitiveness and fighting for playoff spots. So while there's 6 spots available in potential promotion, you're really fighting for 3, because those relegated teams are already at an advantage if you want to look at it that way. So it makes it much harder. So when you get to the championship, that again changes everything. If you get to that point, then you have to reevaluate the financial operation. Maybe you need a big investor to come in and back the club with more finances. Maybe you have to get more creative, but those are the 2 shifts in terms of financial implications that I see, or in my opinion, is when you get to League Two and when you get to the championship. You can look at Wrexham as a really great example. I think they've done a phenomenal job in everything they've done, tying in sponsorships, businesses, leveraging their Hollywood fame in the documentary. They paid their way, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. They paid their way from the National League to now League One. It looks like they have a very good chance to go up from League One to the championship, but it's going to be very, very interesting to see how Wrexham handles that jump. I think it would be 3 promotions in a row from National League, League Two to League One to the championship. and the operation for them is going to change. Are they going to be able to as easily go up from the championship to the Premier League? I don't think so, unless they have a couple different, shrewd moves in their pocket or they're really prepared to do so. I think it's going to be tough for them, and they might be in the championship for 5, 6, 7, 8 seasons, but that's still a really great place for them to be, to go from the National League to the championship in like 4 or 5 years. I mean, it's incredible, and I admire what they've done as an organization. So Wrexham is a really great use case to kind of track that financial journey up the leagues, and it's something that I think Dorking should aspire to be, and I think it's all possible. I think it is very possible to buy your way from the National League to the Championship. Obviously, you have to be responsible with the money. You have to buy the right players. You have to recruit the right players. Make sure they fit the system and the play style that the manager wants to tactically implement. But yeah, I think you can buy your way from the National League to the championship. And that is something I don't know how many people realize. And I think it's possible for Dorking from my perspective. And that's what I kind of want to help them do is, connect the dots, hopefully meet the right people, potential investors, connect the right sponsors, partners, product integration, all those good things to kind of help push us forward from a business perspective that will ultimately lead to more success on the pitch. So, I think you're going to see a spike in interest in non-league clubs from American investors specifically. I think people are slowly going to begin to realize that you can buy your way and you can kind of wreck some operations. And again, that might have a negative connotation from people. People don't like that you can come in with a bunch of money and essentially fund your way up the leagues. I personally don't see anything wrong with it, probably because I'm envious of everything that Wrexham's doing and that I want Dorking to be in that position. But, it's not for some people. I don't think there's anything wrong with it because at the end of the day, from my American school of thought, you're in the game to win. You want to win and you want to be competitive and you want to work your way up the pyramid and you want to make the club bigger and increase your fan base and give the fans a more desirable, fun product to watch. So I think that, I think deep down, everybody kind of wishes that it was their club that was kind of saved by people with money or the people in positions of power to help them get there. But um, yeah, I think that it shouldn't have the negative connotation it does. I mean, there's a ton of sleeping giants throughout the pyramid, big clubs with so much potential. Sheffield Wednesday is a huge opportunity. Huge club, 40,000 seat stadium. I actually went to a Sheffield Wednesday match not too long ago. They were winless at the time, and they were playing Rotherham at home. Still over 20,000 people there. They were like, 1-10 or something. They ended up winning that match. And the atmosphere was electric for even just half filled. You still have 20,000 people there willing to support the club. Wednesday doesn't spend well. I don't know if they lose money on a regular basis, but they don't seem to bring in a ton of really big profile players. They have a new manager, Danny Roll, that came in last season, and he's done a great job. They're definitely in a better position, but that's a club where if a Todd Bowley or Bromovich type person came in and purchased it and was willing to fund it the right way, maybe implement an analytic approach. There's no reason that a club like Sheffield Wednesday should be anywhere below the Premier League. They should be in the Premier League on a regular basis, especially when you look at, Bournemouth, who's been a mainstay in the Prem for, a handful of seasons at this point. The population of Bournemouth is like under 150,000. The population of Sheffield, I think, is like 500,000 or 600,000. So, when you're looking at the population and people that are going to go to the stadium and fill that up and, be passionate about their football club, a small market team can be a Premier League mainstay. Sheffield Wednesday is already at an advantage because they have a huge stadium that they're just looking to fill. So they need to be competitive on the pitch and make sure that they have ownership that's willing to support that. Sunderland is the same way. I know a lot of people have tried with that club over a handful of years, but Sunderland's another sleeping giant. They should be in the Premier League playing Newcastle every season. They have another big stadium, another big market, passionate fan base. So, Wednesday, Sunderland. I think if you look all the way down to League Two, you can look at Bradford City. Bradford is another, I think 25,000 capacity stadium, a lot of loyal season ticket holders, and they're in League Two every single season. I'm not too in tune with, their approach on player recruitment. I know their academy, I think, is pretty solid. Um, but again, Bradford with that big stadium and loyal season ticket holders and thousands of people going every single match, there's no reason. I'm not saying that they're going to be a Premier League mainstay, but they should definitely be above League Two. When you look at their competition in League Two now, teams get promoted from the National League every season. And you look at, Bromley, Chesterfield, Notts County, teams that were recently in the National League that are now in League Two. Chesterfield's got a pretty good infrastructure by them, but I think Bromley's still like 5,000 capacity. Notts County, I think, is probably closer to Chesterfield in that regard. But you have some smaller clubs that are in the same position as Bradford, and there's no reason that Bradford should be there. And that's all just to say, it's all about having that right ownership. It's all about people that want to invest into actually winning football matches. Sometimes you may have to operate at a loss, but you need somebody in a financial position to accept that. And if you can accept that the team might operate at a loss for a number of years, you're going to grow that asset value. You have to do that responsibly. You're not going to spend, a million, you're not going to lose £1 million a month um, and stay in the position that you're in and expect to just get out of that one day. Like I said, you need to make sure that you're spending appropriately. You can operate at a loss to an extent, but you really need to push that. You need to accept that. You need to push the organization forward, knowing that if you get to the Premier League and you get that windfall of money of the TV deal, which is I think like 130, 140 million pounds over the course of 3 seasons, what's a club like Bradford's value if they're, let's say they're worth 10, 15 million right now in League Two. They push their way up to the Premier League based on their stadium and their market. I mean, that could be an organization that's worth $500 million if they do it the right way. So there's so much room to grow that asset way more over in England because of promotion and relegation, because of the way that you're spending on the team and how you can spend that money back on the team. That just doesn't really exist in the United States. It should be more balanced in the States. It's not. People have their arguments on if it's actually balanced in England or not. But realistically, if you have good ownership and people willing to spend the money, your club can be at that level. So it's all right in front of these guys, and it's a position that, like I said, I'd love Dorking to be in, and there's a lot more to it. People have multi-club ownership models where they tie in other clubs across Europe into their system. They could use it for player recruitment, talent scouting, selling sponsorships for bigger deals because you're giving, kit manufacturers and companies more exposure than just one market in England. There's so many ways that people can get creative about pushing their clubs forward. And it's as I said, it's a position that I want Dorking to be in and that I aspire to be in for sure. And it's just about helping push them forward and trying to be one of those clubs that's competitive and financially staying on top of everything and not going into debt, which is very, very difficult, way easier said than done. But yeah, that's kind of the bit on the financial aspects of the game. You know, if you look at Major League Soccer, an expansion franchise right now is $500 million, 500 million to buy an MLS club. Financially safer, no threat of promotion relegation, really small salary cap. Outside of internationals, I think it's like 5 million. Like it's nothing. And the MLS product isn't bad. It's definitely not bad, and the asset's always going to grow in value inherently because that's the way it goes in the States. People will sell it more than what they paid for it. Um, we see it all the time across any of the, four major sports and the MLS. But if you ask me, do you want to spend 500 million on an MLS expansion where that league isn't even, I mean, it's like fringe top 10 most competitive in the world. And again, like I think that the product is good. Like MLS is better quality than other places in the world will probably give it credit for. But if you're asking me, 500 million for an expansion franchise, or do I want to take my chances at 10, 20, 30 million for, League One, League Two club in England? Again, you're going to have to put more financial backing into it other than just buying the organization, but it's way more fun. You get to grow something, you get to turn it into an asset, and that exposure from the Premier League is way better than it is in the MLS. I mean, that's the dream, is to be in the Premier League and get that exposure because there's so many eyes on the Prem. Their domestic deal is worth 5 billion for TV rights, plus the international is another 5 billion. It's marketing wise, it's the NFL of England. The NFL does do better numbers in terms of what the TV deal is worth, but Premier League's not that far off, and it's way far and above what the other leagues in Europe are doing. It's much more than League One in France and the Bundesliga and Serie A. La Liga might be the closest to the Prem, but the Prem is still far and away the most exposure that you're going to get. So would you want to have some fun and actually build something and create something and push it forward and get to that Premier League? Yeah, I think that's way more fun because, like I said, you're in the business to win. You want to win. You want to have fun. And I know that that's not how a lot of people view it. They view it more as a business, and are they going to, make money and sell it for a lot of money? I get that. I do understand that from people that are actually financially backing these organizations. But at the end of the day, you want to win. You want to have fun. You want to build something, and you want to give the fans something that is fun and exciting to build upon, because these teams are set up in smaller communities where, it's an absolute dream for them and their fans to one day play one of these big guys at home. You see Tamworth play Tottenham in the FA Cup. Tamworth is National League right now, and they hosted Tottenham and they lost 3-0. But that day, that experience, to have a big club like that come down to your smaller ground, I mean, that's the beauty of the competition. And I know that's the FA Cup, and it's a different domestic competition than league play, but when you're talking about getting promotions and working up the leagues, that's what you're dreaming of. You're dreaming of your small team turning into a place where, like I said, Wrexham next season, if they're in the championship, they're going to be playing some big clubs. They're going to be playing whoever's freshly relegated from the Premier League. They're going to be playing, clubs that made a promotion push that didn't actually make it out. They could be playing Leeds. They could be playing Sunderland and Sheff Wednesday and all these teams. And when I first got involved in Dorking, I went to a Dorking Wrexham match not that long ago. Even within my short involvement in Dorking, they were playing Dorking Wanderers and they were playing non-league teams. And next season, they very well could be playing some of these sleeping giants in way bigger clubs. So that's what it's all about. And I don't know why people get involved in this if you don't want to have at least a little bit of fun and try to grow something fun. And that's just on why I would put my money, or why I have put my money into English football as opposed to MLS, because the MLS just doesn't have that same community atmosphere. It doesn't have that same, doesn't have the same feeling. It doesn't grab you as well. So I think that, with MLS, it's a solid product. It could be way better. There needs to be changes. I don't even know where I would start with those changes. I might look into it and even talk about that a little bit as I move forward. But I think that the move is to, be involved in England or other European leagues. Buy a team for less than 500 million, invest that same amount of money into the team, push it forward, and then you could be an owner of a Premier League club. That's way better, and that's way more fun and way more exciting than being involved in an MLS club, because MLS, they obviously have Champions League with Mexico and North America, but it's the playoffs and the MLS Cup, and that's what people are watching, and that's kind of it. Make the playoffs or don't. In Europe, you can even further that business exposure by qualifying for Europa League or Champions League. Making a run in the domestic cup competitions. All of that historical infrastructure of how powerful those leagues are far and away bigger than anything that North America or the MLS has. So there needs to be some changes over there in the MLS, and they'll never open up promotion relegation because ownership's not going to vote on opening up their $500 million business to potentially take a financial hit by letting in teams in the lower leagues. I think it'd be a big step in the right direction if they started to let, promotion relegation be a thing. There is a solid infrastructure with USL Championship, USL 1. USL 2 is a bit more of a summer league for NCAA, but between USL Championship and USL League 1, they're in some really interesting markets as well. You have, Madison, Wisconsin, you have Pittsburgh, you have Detroit, you have um, Louisville, you have Albuquerque, New Mexico. You have a number of interesting places that, those communities would care. Like, Louisville, if Louisville could get promoted into the MLS, that would be a huge deal. And it would make it way more fun and entertaining and competitive. I think they need to increase the salary cap. I think they need to change up the season that's more in line with the European season. I think they're worried about this is speculative. Excuse me, this is speculative. I think that they're worried about, competing with the NFL and that schedule. But what they really need to be worried about is competing with the larger soccer/football market globally. They're just not there. They're getting aging European stars to come in. That's kind of been the model for a while. But, the MLS is also not that old. It's very, very new. It was formed in 1996. Um, yeah, I just think there's a lot of issues with MLS and how they could move forward, and what they could do. Um, but you know, they're probably not going to want to change that much, and it's a shame. So obviously, I'm in a position. So I would say if it were me, it is me, and that's where I think the more interesting sports stories are. I think it's way more fun. And it's, if you ever get a chance to take a trip over there, go to some non-league games, go to a ground that you'd never see yourself going into. Also check out, Premier League, Championship. You can really immerse yourself in the culture and the communities and see how much these fans care and they're passionate about their clubs, because when they wear that kit or sweatshirt or badge on their clothing, they're representing their community. It's like if you're from a small town, imagine if that small town had a club that, could one day play in the NFL. If you're from, I don't know, Reading, imagine if you're from Reading and you take pride in that and one day they could go play the Eagles in an NFL match. I mean, that's probably a pretty shitty example, but in theory, that's, what you're looking at over in England. Small communities with a lot of pride that are just hoping for the chance to get to that point, or hoping for the chance to draw a big club in a domestic competition, maybe contend for Europe one day. Um, and from a business perspective, it makes sense for potential American buyers because there's a lot of exposure and a lot of companies that you can advertise that you're involved with all over what you're doing. But the trick is that you have to create a winner. You have to invest into winning. And if you're not investing into winning, then there's no point. If you want to increase your exposure, you got to work your way up. Again, negative connotation behind people that do that. But if you're an American investor, you can't come in and try to manage the bottom line and make sure that you're not bleeding money. Sometimes you might bleed a little bit of money, but it's ultimately going to benefit you, and your organization if you're willing to do so. So, just my thoughts on the whole financial structure. I think it's fascinating. Other people might not. It's what I care about. It's what I'm passionate about, and I think I'm knowledgeable about. So, it's not for everybody, but I want to know what people think. I want to know what people think about this niche, and any opinions on sports business and the financial aspect, and what are best practices, worst practices. I'm very, very curious to see what a lot of people think about something like this, because um, I think there's a lot of good ideas and different ways to go about it. I think data analytics is going to play a huge part in the sport moving forward. I think that the World Cup coming to the United States is going to put a lot of eyes on the sport. I think parents are going to shift their children to play this game as opposed to maybe getting involved in, the NFL, or not the NFL, but playing football because it's dangerous. Some negative connotations behind playing football going on here in youth. Basketball is very, very popular. They could maybe look away from some of these oversaturated sports and pivot to something like soccer that's way more global, and there's more opportunities to play in different parts of the world, not even just, at an MLS Next Pro club or in the MLS. I think there's a lot of room for athletes and youth to play this sport. And I think it's going to be seen in a very, very big way once the World Cup is here in 2026. And I think you're going to see an absolute boom in investment and participation and investment into youth, grassroots, domestic, foreign, whatever. So I think we're going to see a really, really big shift come that time. And again, unless the MLS changes, I think that money should be put into English football because it's the birthplace of the game and it's way more fun and way more interesting. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. And if people think that it should be more MLS driven and we should protect our domestic talent and keep them stateside, I think that's great. I think if people think that it should be moved to Europe and that kind of pathway, I think that's great. I think that there's a lot of different opinions you can have, and not all of them are right and not all of them are wrong. But I'm just curious to see what people think about it all, because I love to talk about it and I'm always here to talk about it and, discuss these different topics, finances, club structure, unique stories, passionate fan bases, the whole thing. So that's my bit about, the current state of what I think about, soccer finances, football finances, what I'd like to see from my own club that I'm involved with. And it's been an interesting journey that I want a lot of people to join. So that's my bit for now. It's my first YouTube live, so this will probably go well. Nobody was in here, but yeah, hope to grow this and keep an open forum where we can all kind of get along and talk about the sport, because that's the best part of being involved in any community, is just the camaraderie and talking and sharing ideas and having a good time while you do it. So, like I said, I'm Kyle, and I'm always here, and talk to you guys on the next one.